Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, joined again by Jeff Robinson, and this week we have another very special guest joining us, another Women's Rugby World Cup finalist and currently involved with Rugby Canada as well with Rugby in Alberta, Maria Samson. Maria, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So when we have our interviews, we always start with the same few questions, and this one is going to be no different. So, Maria, what got you started in rugby?
Yeah, so a Rugby for Dummies book, of all things. I grew up in Quebec, so high school there is grade 7 to 11, and I played on the boys football team in the fall. I played basketball over the winter. And when I was in grade 8, a new sport started in Farmtown, Quebec, near Lachute. And my football coach had some daughters, and he was motivated to start a contact sport. And he literally had a Rugby for Dummies book, and we learned the game. And that's how I kind of got involved in it. And it was such a social sport for me. I'm a true community product. Like couldn't even have told you that there was a Canadian rugby team at that point, and I had started playing, when Gillian Florence was like at her peak. So it was there would have been some great role models at the time, but for me it was just fun. 15 gals on a field playing together.
That's awesome, man. That's a very unique way to get involved in the sport. So
Totally.
you may have answered the next one, but of the 3 standard questions, but who was a figure that was influential when you started playing?
I mean, to be honest, it has to be our coach, Mr. D, Dave Donaldson, for sure, just getting us into the sport. And then, my first club exposure was with St. Anne's in St. Anne de Bellevue. And so folks like Marge Thompson, Lee Bieber, Jose Lacasse, Jill Florence was there. I didn't even realize what type of phenom she was when I played. Marty Silverstone, and those are all, almost all of those individuals are actually still involved with St. Anne's, which is actually incredible and just kind of a testament to, good people getting involved in the sport and staying in the sport and sport for life. And it's been pretty incredible, even going back to see kind of my mom in Eastern Ontario and, making a trip out to St. Anne's to watch my sister's kids play juniors there.
That's wonderful. And is there any player that whenever they stepped onto the pitch that you just love to watch them play?
Yes, and I think when I think of like an international perspective, Antoine Dupont is I'm a big fan of his. And then when I think kind of locally, and she actually probably doesn't know this, but Chelsea Guthrie, who played under Chelsea Ross when she was married, she played for Canada. She went to one of the World Cups, I believe 2017. But I played against her a lot in Alberta. She played 9, and she just has this way of playing that is just so dynamic, so fast. Back when you could jackal the ball immediately after a tackle without having to get onside, like she would get up from the wrong side of the ball and jackal. And I dreaded playing against her, but her style of play was just, I really, really enjoyed watching it. And kind of her speed of play was probably kind of what really drew me and made me a big fan of hers.
Is she still involved in, because you said in Alberta?
Yeah, she's in Edmonton. Yeah, so she actually coaches. She's been really involved with age grade stuff at the national team level. I believe she's been involved with FISU before. She's played at FISU. She's really one of the up and coming women's coaches right now. So yeah, she's definitely still involved with the game. And doing great jobs with the whistle.
That's so important for like players to stay involved and stuff. That's great to see. Yes. Mm-hmm. So going back to you now, Maria, when you played at McGill Marlets, it was part of the U Sports system. How did being a part of the structured season league help develop you as a player?
I mean, so not dating myself, but back when I played, it was CIS, and it was just so different in terms of I would say professionalism. Like when you think of women's youth sports across the country right now, for rugby especially, you have like many professional environments across the country, which have made the sport really what it is today. And I think for me, like it was 3 times a week. We didn't weight lift. We went to an hour and a half practice 3 times a week. Um, but what it really did do is made me fall in love with the game over and over and over again in terms of having my teammates. And I actually ended up playing 2 years at McGill, one my second year and one my last year after doing a stint at the University of Windsor playing basketball. So it was just one of those things where I just kind of like, oh, I guess I'll go play rugby because that's the sport, that I want to go play. And it really allowed me then when on my engineering co-ops as well, when I went to Fort McMurray, Windsor, Ontario, here in Calgary, I was able to join a team and have, 30 gal and guy friends immediately. So I think I really appreciated being able to participate in the sport at the university level. I was fortunate to go to nationals when they were held in Halifax. So that was kind of a really eye-opening experience. But at the time that I played, I had no aspirations to play any higher. So for me, it was just an opportunity to be like a really good teammate. I got to develop some of my leadership skills, being the captain of the Martlets my last year, being able to balance school and sport. I think gave me a lot of skills, and I'm able to balance, now work life juggling, I will say, maybe not balance. I heard that yesterday with 4 kids, but it certainly had a huge impact on my life, but maybe not in the same way that athletes coming out of university now having kind of that professional environment have.
Out of curiosity, as a player back when you were really developing your rugby background, what was your favorite position to play?
Good question. So I played fly half at McGill.
Mhm.
I was much different 13 knee surgeries ago, where I had probably more speed, more sidestep. And then it was actually John Tate in 2011 at my first Rugby Canada camp. I had gone to back row. So all my Rugby Alberta jerseys were like 12, 12, 12, 12, and then all of a sudden 4 and 5. But I really credit him where I showed up at a national team camp and he just said, "Hey, how do you feel about trying being a second row?" And I was like, "I'll give anything a shot," right? Like I didn't, no ego, and got boosted in my first line out. That within 5 minutes of having that conversation, and just once I got over no longer having control of the game and just really like I have a job to do and it's in the trenches, then it was almost like liberating in a way, right? And the fact that I remember putting Lisa Gauthier away on a 2-on-1 in Red Deer when we played against the US. And the commentator was like, "Oh my God, look at that second row." And I didn't make a lot of passes when I played for Canada, I'll be honest. But I made that one pass and everybody went, "Woo!"
All right, wonderful to hear. Just curious, what are some of your best memories when you were playing for McGill?
So one was actually off field. It was actually, I couldn't attend the end of year sports banquet where I was fortunate to be awarded most valuable player. And my teammates put my head on a stick and put me in a backpack and like carried me around the whole evening, the whole night. So there's pictures of me, receiving quote unquote my award. It was just like, a big head on the stick. But it's kind of like speaks to like the relationships that you make at university and kind of like, I would say like the importance for my teammate to make me feel recognized and to be there, I think was really, really powerful and impactful. And so, yeah, like that's one of my fondest moments. I think tour for sure. We went to Halifax twice, by bus, we played a season opener against Queens every year. So it's kind of like those distinctive memories, but, and then now when I think about it, there's actually a player that used to play on the Concordia team, and I ended up playing classics with her. And you always think like you play against someone, and you're like they're the enemy, and then you play on the same team together, and they're like, "Oh my God, we're besties. I wish we would have played together, sooner." So I just think kind of those rivalries and memories for sure, and probably Vince de Grand Pré. He was the coach at McGill at the time, and I could kick a ball very far away. It used to be when we practice a lot, and I credit that a lot to him. So.
So, following your university years, what were the prospects of playing rugby, like either in Canada or overseas for you at that time?
I would say, I mean, in Canada for sure at a club level, right? Like I never would have looked at a overseas option. It was graduate from university, go get a job.
Yeah.
And when I graduated in 2007, moved to Calgary in 2008, had already met my now husband by then, and we both were in Calgary kind of by that 2009 frame. But I joined the Calgary Saints here in Calgary because I played for St. Anne's, and I was like, oh, Saints, like that makes sense, right? Not really looking into any history or anything around what level they played for the women or anything like that. And then ended up trying out for Alberta in 2008 because why not? I had some teammates driving up to Red Deer. Might as well join them to play for Alberta. And so I actually got cut from that first team. Then somebody got injured the week of leaving to go play nationals in Montreal. So, on the plane I got because I had continued to come to practice because why not? What else am I going to do on a Sunday morning? And end up being kind of the camera girl for that tournament for the 3 games, didn't put on a jersey. And I just kept coming back, right? 2009 got to play a little bit more with Team Alberta. 2010 was a starter. 2011 got called up to Canada. It was really fast. So I think just kind of continuing to show up is probably my story more than having some big opportunity kind of staring me in the face when I graduated university. It was really wow, like I love rugby and I love the club atmosphere and I love making friends. And, I'm 6 feet tall, I have a good frame. And all of a sudden that just kind of really was surrounded by the right people at the right time to make a move to have that opportunity to play for Canada.
How did you find the quality of rugby in Alberta different from when your university days out east, especially at that time?
Uh, Good question. I mean, Alberta beat Quebec in, I think that bronze final in 2008. So maybe it was a little bit better.
Yeah.
Certainly different. I would say kind of Quebec geographically, maybe a little bit the same in terms of like the hubs are Montreal and Quebec. So you kind of still have that 3-hour drive in the same way that you do between Calgary and Edmonton. But I think I was just so blind and naive to it in terms of even, going to nationals and what that means. Um, I think when I got called up after somebody had got injured, I was like, oh, cool. Like I get to go back to Montreal. I get to play in front of my friends and my family. So then not playing at all was certainly an ego hit. But yeah, I think that's that kind of like that community base that just like keeps you coming back for the teammates and the coaching and all that stuff.
Interesting. There's a bit of a misconception, and we discussed it when we had Sophie DeGoody on last week, is that now that there is a professional competition in other parts of the world, such as the PWR in England, there's competition in France and New Zealand as well, is that Canada should be able to have one as soon as possible, but there's a lot of different aspects that prevent it so, such as available financing. Geography is also a big one as well. And so, if you're playing in Canada, it's semi-pro at best and more likely amateur. And as you said, you would graduate from university, get a job, and rugby was just something you could do on the side, but it wasn't a career builder. What is something that people often overlook when you have to balance a rugby career with, full-time employment?
Oh boy. I mean, for me, if I made a joke to somebody once that if I, wasn't already married or, didn't already have a partner, that I would have a cat during my training days. And they were like, no, you'd have a cactus because you don't have time to take care of a cat. A cat being able to basically take care of itself, right? When you're away using a litter box and stuff. So there was no life. There was no life for me from the period around like 2010 to 2016 in terms of the amount of rehab, prehab. I changed my work hours 6 to 3 so that I could do all my training in the evening. So there were like there at 3:01, I was out of the office to beat traffic to get to my training spot, and whatever you had to do and get home and eat and go to bed. And it was just rinse and repeat. And luckily my husband, Mozak Samson, was kind of on that same cycle, trying to play for Canada and eventually did in 2016. But I think all the things that you don't see, you see the game, but you don't see the number, how many knee surgeries I've had, a couple shoulder surgeries, back surgery. I've put my nose back a few times. And not everybody has those injuries or whatnot, but you're constantly injured, right? Like you're never at a fully 100% after doing, a tackling session 48 hours earlier before a game. Like something hurts, something is sore. And so that for sure is a big piece. You give up on, for me, like corporately, like for the World Cup, the year of the World Cup, I was gone for, 9 to 10 weeks. And I was just like, hey, hope I have a job when I come back. You don't have to pay me, but, fingers crossed. But I think I was one of the fortunate ones, right? I was able to have a career. And so, yeah, that for sure. And it's lonely. It's really lonely. I was the only World Cup athlete from Alberta. And so kind of training on your own, I did have a really good support network. Like when I had to run, we had to do some fitness testing, and I had friends of mine, we had to like jump a fence to get to a track to video me running a 1600 meter, and they ran with me, so you create your support network, but it can be quite lonely for sure.
I think you're kind of leading to my next question. What are some of your favorite memories stood out for you when you're playing in Calgary? Like,
Yeah, I mean, certainly playing club, like playing club and playing for Canada were just so different for me. Like playing for Canada, I was a little bit maybe more of like a brute role, in terms of playing second row and the jobs I had there, but playing club, like there's still times I played 10. I ran way more with the ball. I set other people up. I was much more, I would say, like a dynamic player, and I had to be, right? But like that to me was just really, really fun. Being able to coach like our Division 2 team when I played at the Calgary Hornets for a few years, that was a lot of fun. So kind of memories around Calgary again, right? Like that community-based sport. Juniors and minis really started picking up when I started playing for Canada. So having that opportunity of like, oh my gosh, Maria, come talk to, XYZ, or come to some sporting event, with juniors and minis. And that just wouldn't have existed maybe 5 years prior to. So those things were kind of, and then, when I kind of flipped the script to the national team, getting to play in Calgary at home at the Calgary Rugby Park, versus New Zealand. I don't know how well known it is. I kind of have spoken about it in interviews, but I had torn my ACL 4 months before that game and had surgery right away. And so I had 4 months to get into playing shape. So I ran a beep test at 12 weeks, and I just kept my head down, and, it was a very small group of people that knew that I was trying to make the team. And, basically 16 weeks, to the day ended up playing against New Zealand. And so, I see these things about like, oh, somebody came back in 6 months, somebody came back in 12 months. And I did it in 4, and my dad had then passed away a month before that game happened. And so I just think back from a memory perspective, like if I hadn't decided in February 2015 that I was going to be able to play in June 2015, I never would have had the opportunity to kind of like honor my father's memory in a way. And so that for me is very special, and playing in front of people that supported me financially, from a community perspective, running 1600 meters with me, like that was pretty cool. Like we had like fans at the CRP that had like MJ like written on their stomach and stuff. It was cheesy but awesome.
Going back to the Saints, you touched on it, like how we saw the start of the growth of the youth, the mini rugby back in the day. Comparing that to now, are you like, are you, I guess, happy with the progress that has been made so far, or more needs to be done?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly happy with the progress, because you
Yeah.
think about it, the last 20 years of
Hmm.
what has happened with minis, and probably even less than that, 15, kind of like zero to hero, certainly here in Alberta, and
Hmm.
developing those programs. And I have a child that's 3, and he's playing flag rugby this year. I have my 5-year-old daughter, my 7-year-old son. They've been playing flag rugby for, this is now their 3rd year. And so that is just incredible. I think where there's still to go is, Calgary has, a massive land mass. It stretches, if you go from the southeast corner to the northwest corner, you're looking at an hour drive. And all rugby basically goes to the Calgary Rugby Park on Saturday mornings. And that for some people can be like a 45-minute drive. And it's great from a building a rugby community perspective, but it's really hard to get rugby within your own community in the Southwest Calgary, Northwest Calgary, Northeast Calgary that isn't so close to the rugby union. And so I think there's something there that we can take from, let's say, the soccer model where they run within at the community center, where they run their, quote unquote, mini soccer, Timbit soccer for an hour on Saturday mornings with no pressure to drive to the Calgary Rugby Park to partake in a Thursday night practice. They just do a 1 hour thing. And so I think there's things there where we can kind of, if I think of the Saints, maybe we could have our own Saturday morning jamborees without having to go to the Calgary Rugby Park. It certainly pulls athletes away from the Calgary Rugby Park, but I think overall it's kind of like a little bit of pain for long-term gain. Yeah.
I've noticed a big difference when my daughter did U5s the first year. I think she was one of the only U5 like that age. Most of the other kids were like 1 year older in her group, and then now I look at it, my gosh, the numbers, they're in their 20s, I think, for each of the age groups now.
Yeah, like Saints and Canucks, I think have like 2 teams in U5 and U7, both of them. Like it's
And
blown up and
U9,
it's awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
U9 we have two
awesome.
too. Yeah,
Very cool.
yes. Mhm.
Yeah, it's always good to hear about how rugby is growing, especially in these small age grades, and showing that hey, there's still interest with children and how that's growing, and more bringing it on to how you continue to hold interest and stuff. There's always been the conversation about professionalism in Canada. Now I think it was like last year was the first season of Women's Elite Rugby, or WER, in the United States, and it seems to be remaining within the US. I think that's the plan for the time being. But then it brings the question of, will Canada start having its own professional model, whether that's a copy, whether it's professionalizing clubs and stuff. And I know there's obviously a lot of things to go behind it, obviously finances, politics as well. But as a player and someone involved in rugby in Calgary, what do you believe is like the feasibility of a professional competition for women's rugby in Canada, and what are some of like the biggest limitations at this point?
Yeah, I mean, if I think of the Toronto tests that are coming up in October for the women against England, like those stadiums have to be full, and not full lower bowl, not full one side of the stadium. Anybody, like the stadium has to be packed. And then you can think, okay, if I can fill a stadium for an international, then you can start thinking about what that next tier looks at professionally. But if I think of kind of the last few tests that we've had in Canada, BC Place, in Ottawa, the stadiums aren't full. And so we talk about supporting our women's rugby players and how important it is, and sometimes get aggravated with national sports unions not supporting enough. But at the end of the day, we need to have our version of a Twickenham. We need to have our version of any stadium in the world that's getting packed for women's games. And until we have that, it's a little bit pie in the sky to start thinking about professional setups, especially when we have such a great university system. And I'm not saying it doesn't suck, because it does. But once we have kind of that fan base that actually shows up and pay money, and people stop complaining about games being on TSN behind a subscription, like if you love the sport, if you want to see these women succeed, you got to pay, whether it's to see it on TV, to see it bums in seats. And that's not necessarily a popular opinion. Like I can understand people saying, well, oh, if you make it free, more people will come. But the reality is we've tried that and it hasn't worked, right? We've gone through these cycles of it, of, okay, make it free, see how many people log on. Nope, same amount of people as whether it was on, behind a paywall. So it's interesting. It's interesting that way. I would love to see it happen in my lifetime, for sure. Uh, I just don't know. I don't know if we're there yet, but the October games will definitely allow us to see if it's possible, for sure. I want it to happen. Enormous amount of finances. We saw what happened with the US MLR in terms of financial backing and losing money all the time, right?
Mhm.
And the contraction that
Yeah.
occurred there. So
Yeah, I think that's a very balanced answer of, this is the price of admission, literally and like metaphorically as well. Is that if you want to see these Canadian players play in Canada, they need to get paid, and
Mhm.
you need to pay to come to these games. You need to pay to watch it. You need to show that there is an audience willing to pay
yeah,
to have this here. And yeah, I mean, especially, I think as well, obviously combining with the biggest women's World Cup that happened last year, the second largest attended World Cup final, regardless of gender, last year.
yeah,
Um, yeah, if that now obviously there's no stadium in Canada that's as big as Twickenham, so we're not so
mhm,
we can't even get to the 80,000 that we had then. But and unfortunately for the Toronto games, those temporary scaffolding seats will be taken down following the FIFA World Cup.
yeah,
But yeah, I think that I think it's like 23,000 and change. Yeah, if we can definitely have that sold out, and obviously the same thing again at TD Place, I think that is a great benchmark to have for the
absolutely.
appreciation of women's rugby.
Yeah, it will be very interesting to see how the positive influence and the positive energy that women's rugby especially got in Canada from that World Cup. See how much it translates over now like that. So hopefully, they do sell out both and get
Yeah,
really good press there too from it too, and can build on it.
totally.
Yes. Okay, now coming back to you more specifically, Maria, your first match for Canada was against South Africa in 2011 Nations Cup. Obvious question.
15 years ago.
Yeah. What did it mean to you to put on the national jersey for the first time?
A lot. Oh God, I got like goosebumps. It's funny, my boss at the time actually made the trip from Toronto to Oakville. I mean, it wasn't far for him, but it was very meaningful, I think, that he did that. And my family made the trip as much as they could to almost all my games, which was pretty cool. So uh, I generally did not get nervous before games. But the anthem comes on and I have tears streaming down my face. So Ron LeBlanc, bless his soul, he gets so many pictures of me of, just anthem pictures, like the calm before the storm in a way, with just like the single tears on each side coming down. So I was able to have my first cap beside Daniel Warren, who played under the name Daniel Rowland. So that was really cool because we were side by side, 4 and 5. She had previously been cap for Canada, so it was kind of cool to be under her wing, so to speak. But it was really special. It was a huge game. Like we blew out South Africa, I don't know, 52-7 or 50-3, something like that. And it was relief. It was boiling hot in Oakville, Ontario in the summer in August. And I think it was just relief about like I had done it. And then I got really fortunate to kind of start my first cap, start all 4 games during that series. I've been really fortunate that way in terms of just getting that opportunity, I think, under the various coaching staff that I've played. So yeah, a lot for sure. It's
Did
hard
you
to put
ma
into words, I think.
did you manage to get some tries from that tour?
Oh my God, I had a breakaway and I got caught in like the third meter line or so third meter line and I got chased down by the South African 15. No, I was not a try scorer when I
Ah,
played for Canada. I scored like 5 tries a game, sometimes in club. But I scored 4 tries once for Alberta in a single game. But no, with Rugby Canada, never touched it down.
you did all the hard work for the wingers.
Nah, something like that. Yeah. You know what? Magali Harvey's big try that is from my knock on. So I
Yeah.
feel like that's an assist, right? We wouldn't have turned over that scrum if I hadn't knocked on the ball. It was my only knock on in international rugby on the 5 meter line in a World Cup semifinal. So yeah.
And so, following the 2011 Nations Cup, you also had some tours to Europe and New Zealand during the career.
Mhm.
What were some of the more memorable moments, both on and off the field?
Oh gosh, probably in New Zealand, um, I had Brittany Waters. I think I was either holding a bag for Brittany Waters or she was holding a bag for me. Anyway, she clocked me right in the face somehow, broke my nose. And so then playing against the second test against New Zealand, I got a cleat in the face, 5 minutes in. So I have a broken nose, so I have two black eyes, and then I got a cleat in the face and then cleats all down my neck. And it was actually Olivia Demerchon who turns around and just kind of like takes her jersey and wipes the blood off my face. And she's like, "You got it?" And I was like, "Mm-hmm." We just like scrummage down again. So it's almost like those like parts of the game that are really part of the game. It's like those little interactions in between. When we went to Europe, we stayed in like an army base, a UK army base with like you could only have so many people on the internet at one time, like cold water showers. It was, we had
Mhm.
prison, we had all these nicknames for places, right? We went to the prison, we went to the jail. And it was just like kind of all that off-field stuff. We went to France, we played two tests there. We played one test in a I'll call a soccer town and one test in a rugby town. And the reaction from the fans was, the stereotype. When we played in the soccer town, it was, the announcer trying to tell the crowd not to boo when our kicker was kicking. Whereas we played in the rugby town and we got like the full welcome with, the kids walking out with us and the band, and they would cheer whether we had the ball or France had the ball. So that kind of stuff. And like those tours of Kim Donaldson and I basically were always roommates. We just clicked. And so that kind of stuff was really neat. The watching Sharknado. We watched Sharknado once in the US when we played in Denver. We watched, and Cheryl Phillips like would anticipate what would happen, and she was like right 99% of the time. Like it was kind of creepy how right she was during Shark Week. So that kind of stuff. It was all like the off-field banter. I think that you actually see through social media now, but back then we weren't videoing everything, right? We weren't putting it on. We didn't have Rugby Canada media following us all the time. So yeah, those are good memories for sure.
A question I usually like to ask for the people who played internationally. What was your favorite city, town you visited on a tour, and what was your favorite stadium you played in?
Stadium is for sure Stade Jean in the World Cup semifinal and final in 2014. It was packed for both,
Mhm.
and it was great. We had, I think 22,000 people, 150 Canadian fans that you could hear roaring,
Mhm.
which was really, really cool. City-wise, when we went to New Zealand and played in Aratora, we got like a very cultural experience there and really welcomed kind of like pregame with a cultural experience.
Mhm.
So I think that was really unique and really special for rugby for sure. Um, yeah, I would say probably those are definitely the two favorites when I think of international really kind of special experiences for sure. Yeah.
Well, speaking of the 2014 Women's Rugby World Cup, and for all our podcast listeners, Maria has a photo of the final behind her. Um,
I
but
do.
but before we get to the final, let's go and talk about that semi-final. You're not only in Stade Jean in Paris, you're up against the host nation, France, who, and very partisan crowd, I assume, within the
Hmm.
arena. Um, and you have a job to do. You know what needs to be done. And obviously, the format of the World Cup at the time is, you have to finish either top of your pool or the next best team to do so, and you got to draw against England in the pool
Hmm.
stage, and that's what helped you qualify, and then it's just straight into the semi-finals after the pools. So, it's only, you've got 2 more games to go, and medals are on the line and stuff. So this is the first time Canada could potentially go all the way for gold. So what was the thought process going into that game, during the game, and after the game as well? Because
Going into the semifinal.
Yeah.
It's funny. I bought tickets for my family for every game, for all the pool games and the semifinal and final, before we even knew we were in them. And I never even thought about it. I was just like, well, they're going to want to go no matter what, right? Not even thinking whether we would be in it or not in it. It was just like, of course you're going to attend the semifinal and final if you're going to spend a month in Paris. My mom, 2 sisters, 3 children, and my husband. So, like, they had amazing seats with French diplomats because we were early adopters, kind of getting in line to get seats. But the lead up was the same, and I think that's probably something that Francois did really well, coaching up. Was the lead up to playing against France, was the lead up to the same when we played against Samoa. The turnaround was so fast. So back then we had a day off, we had a training day, which included contact. We had a captain's run day, and we played. So we had 3 rest days, quote unquote, between all games. I lost 11 kilos during that World Cup over 5 games. I was so skinny coming back. You could not eat enough, and it was so hot. But I think what was really cool, some of the things that made it special, we got a police escort to the stadium. We were delayed a bit, so I think maybe that caused nerves a bit underneath. There was a little bit of a delay with Ireland and England. And then England just like trounced Ireland during that semifinal. So maybe like a little bit of a reality check, and came like, okay, like personally, like not wanting to get trounced on, right? Not that you ever play like defensively. I still want to play offensively, but it was everything was the same. There was nothing special about the lead up. And I say that in such a positive way. It was the same. We did the same warm up. We did the same everything. Maybe Kelly's pre-match speech was a little bit more intense. I remember Kelly, so I did a lot of the girls' braids in their hair. And I remember, with Kelly going into the final, I was like, do you want different braids? And she was like, nope. Same ones. And it was just that, that's all I can say. Like, it sounds boring, but I think like that idea of like making your preparation the same, and at the end of the day, it's just rugby. Yes, it's a World Cup final or a World Cup semifinal, but it's just rugby, right? And so I think that's when you're in it, I have a hard time even remembering the crowd or anything. I remember the game, but it didn't seem so like fanfare-ish, I guess, when we were there.
Well, now going on to 2016, that was your final game for Canada. When did you know that it was time to retire from playing?
Oh God, when I couldn't rehab from injuries anymore. I think I had a double scope on my knees, and it couldn't get back, I think, to where I wanted to be. And I felt probably club wise was taking probably the frustration of not being able to get better. Probably I started being a bad teammate, maybe a poor leader. And I think that for me was kind of the realization of like, maybe I'm falling out of love with playing the sport. Still very much wanted to be involved with the sport. But just really, it wasn't fun anymore. Right. And I think I was lucky to be able to pull away, even though it was in a quasi way injury related in terms of not being able to get back to not 100%, but a percentage I felt comfortable. I was able to kind of choose my own terms and when I wanted to retire. I had my first cap at 28, so I was no spring chicken, after 5 years of playing on the national team. It was a hard decision. I remember calling Francois, Gary Ducalo, and kind of saying, it's time. And they probably knew it before I did, I'll be honest. But it was time to step away from that high level. Still played club for a couple years. But ended up stepping away from from Canada, but still played I think a couple of years of Alberta Wolfpack when they renamed at the times.
Yeah, it's interesting. I recently saw an interview of Sam Warburton, who retired in 2014. His last Test match being the Lions Test against New Zealand in 2013, which tied the series. And as a Welsh supporter at the time, it was like heartbreaking that he was retiring so early. But they're saying due to injury at the time, he then revealed in this interview that he had. I think he was in like the same boat as you. Is like he getting delayed with recovery. His mood wasn't where it was, and it was more of the mindset of, if I'm not gonna play at 100% or as close to 100% as possible, I don't want to play anymore. And and so it's something that he was able to blame on. Oh, my injuries are so bad, and I don't want to. But I do feel that something that's come, especially more over like the last 10, 15 years, is like the mentality of rugby and the effect it has on players. And as because rugby obviously went professional very late compared to a lot of other sports, is that this terms of like sports psychology hasn't really been present. Well, and it is now. So it's very interesting to see both players of your caliber being able to say like you can fall out of love playing the sport, but still love the sport itself.
Totally.
So in 2016, you make the call and say, maybe I'm not going to play Test rugby anymore, but I may be one of Canada's smartest people. So in this perfect segue, you competed in the show Canada's Smartest Person in the 2016 season. And ultimately, you won your first round, and then in the grand final, you finished third.
I sure
How
did.
did all that come together?
Oh my gosh. So first of all, I still lose sleep about losing. I'm so competitive, and I was so tired, and it was a musical and physical challenge, which are like both my strengths. And anyway, crap the bed. So I got headhunted. I got an email from the show, and I ignored it because I thought it was spam. And then they emailed me again, and they're like, "Hey, like, think you'd be great." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'll reply and see what happens." And so I did an interview when like video Zoom was not cool. Basically had an interview where I did a quasi intelligence test over Zoom, all different things, logical, musical. I had to dance. And they were like, "Yeah, like, we think you'd be great." And I was like, "This is a joke." And then lo and behold, I got on the show. It was so fun, but it was exhausting. It was reality TV, like they make you repeat lines. So they're not telling you what to say, but you just like, "Ooh, you said that cool line. Can you just like say it again so we can get the right camera angle?" Which is kind of funny. But it was like 14 hours of filming for an episode. And as somebody who has played an 80-minute game where you're on for the 80 minutes, I could not bring myself down. And so I was just so mentally exhausted by the end of the day. Still friends with people that we were on the show with, because you just like you just bond so quickly. Very cool, very fun experience. I would do it again in a heartbeat if they had a reunion show. Yeah, any day of the week, I will do challenges for sure for time.
Where was the show filmed? Toronto
It was in
or?
Toronto.
Okay.
Yeah, so we had to say top secret. My mom and a sister came for kind of both, and then an extra sister came for the finale, I think. And two friends of mine, Robbie and Molly Doran, came to watch as well, which is kind of cool. But everything was very hush hush about like why I was in Toronto, but live audience and everything. It was cool. It was really neat. Yeah.
All right. Well, coming back to rugby, you've been involved with Rugby Canada and athletics as a whole following your retirement. What are some roles you've undertaken, and what have been your proudest achievements, I guess, like post-career?
Oh boy, taken on a lot of rugby roles, it feels like. So, certainly so just kind of like off book a lot of review of bylaws for kind of local clubs, some of our sub unions in provincial union. Joined the Rugby Canada board in 2017 after being on the players committee, and kind of feeding info into the board through the players rep. So was a player rep for 2 years, then became a general director and was vice chair for 2 years. So I was part of the first all-female pairing with Sally Dennis when she was chair, and I was vice chair. So I was on the board for 6 years. And then on a slew of committees, governance, both when I was on the board and after, currently on the Legacy Committee, as well as on the Canadian University Men's Rugby Championship Committee, which is trying to get into youth sports. We have an application in. We should find out in 2 weeks. But chair of that, been on the committee now, I think for, oh gosh, maybe 5 years. Has a lot of success there. And I run the alumni database for all our Canada players, which kind of keeps everyone connected, hopefully, and they get one free ticket to the game, whatever internationals playing in Canada. So it's always a fun thing to do. When you think of some of the proudest things that I've done, certainly the governance changes at Rugby Canada, reducing the size of the board, which sounds small, but there was a time when the Rugby Canada board was 13, 14 people, and we reduced it down to 7 to 9. And out of that actually was when I was year 2 on the board, maybe year 3. But I was up for re-election, and I put forth the proposal to reduce the size of the board, therefore eliminating the spot that would have gotten me re-elected. So you talk about people and people are out there self-serving interests. Like for me, that is one example for myself where I completely took myself out of the equation in order to be able to do what's best for Rugby Canada. And then lo and behold, the elections happened. Somebody got voted in who then had to step down a couple months later, and I was able to fill that spot. So it was almost very serendipitous for me to put myself, for lack of a better word, and then be involved in that. So a lot of the governance changes. No women's paid to play anymore, right? Being involved in that was really special. Gosh, there's probably a lot of things at the Rugby Canada board when I think behind the scenes and some of the changes that they've made and have continued to make that I hope some of the success that we're seeing now in the women's rugby team is obviously a huge part of the women and the athletes that are playing. Like that's 99.9% of it, but I would say at least 0.1 is some of those structural changes that we did at Rugby Canada. For sure. And then, pet projects. So the women's cap database, put that together, almost from scratch with the help of Liz Ferguson and putting together, I don't know how many caps we have in terms of, it was 25,000 data elements that we had to put together, which ended up feeding World Rugby's cap database for our women. And then I'm currently putting together our men's, I'm about 80% through. Might need some help there at some point, but it's going back through archives one by one, checking the data that World Rugby has, checking what's on the internet, seeing if you can find old programs. It's a lot of work, but I hope that the history and the celebration of athletes to me is so important, and being able to say so Tyson Buckaboom being the most capped all-time player, the only reason that we were able to track that is because I had done hours and hours of work to put the cap database together. And so I feel very, behind closed doors, feel very proud of that work and what it's been able to do to drive stories around our women. And the number of women that we have in the top 10 caps of all time that are currently playing is huge. And seeing that history and seeing my own name go down the list with 21 caps that used to be much higher and now it's much lower. So being able to do that, I think for the men is really important, to make sure that we just have accurate data and consistent data, right? Yeah. So it's special. It's weird. I'm a total nerd, but I love it.
Well, it's great to see, because I've often told people, especially the women's team, they should be much more recognized in Canada, well known for their achievements, both on and off the pitch. They deserve all the plaudits they get for what they have done.
We have a huge part in that as fans. And I'll share one story of when I first got on the board and the kind of the difference in exposure that Rugby Canada perhaps gave And I counted tweets because, X Twitter was like the thing. And I counted the number of tweets that were about men's rugby and women's rugby to provide somebody with stats. Because until you actually kind of put that in front. So here I am, in my basement counting tweets as a Rugby Canada board member to show what type of difference that there actually was in numbers.
Yes.
And, squeaky wheel gets the grease, and you more the do that, you more the show. Like we're probably pretty even right now, or even our women's team is perhaps dominating a little bit more our socials for sure.
Impressive work, gotta say.
Grunt work.
So it's also recently been announced that Calgary and Ottawa will be training hubs for Rugby Canada. What was your opinion on that?
I think it's great. Yeah, no, I think Langford has a purpose, and I think having people stay in their communities or near to their communities, I think is really important. That support network, I talked about being lonely. I was lonely, but I was at home in Calgary, right? So I couldn't imagine having to make a trip and centralize somewhere else, decentralize out of where I'm living and lose that support network. I also think it's really important from a perspective of having elite level athletes within your community. So those athletes are going to play club rugby in your community. They're going to go out to events in your community. They're going to be training with other athletes in the community. And I think really setting that standard is really important. So you can see what you have to achieve if you have that goal, and also just generally raising the level of rugby. So I think it's massive, getting more data. I personally obviously love that there's one in Calgary. We have two universities here in Calgary that have rugby programs. Not all U Sports. Our women's team at MRU is not U Sports, I like to say yet. But I think it's really good for the player base to have that opportunity and to develop coaches too, for sure, right? Let's develop that coaching staff. And a lot of the best officials in our game have been past elite players, and I think there's opportunity there as well. If I would have made one change in my quote unquote playing career, it would have been to start refereeing sooner. It just completely changes your perspective of the game.
I think from the performance centers, I think there's a bit of disappointment because the strategic plan from which I think was like 2024 through to 2029 mentioned that they were aiming to have 4 by 2025, 8 by 2029, and we're in 2026 and it's still 2, which, obviously strategic plans are done with the most optimistic outlook possible, and we had Rugby Canada announce the memorandum of understanding in the middle of last year, I believe, and so it is basically a case of like trust the process and keep it going, but it's also of the understanding of like what you've told the rugby public in Canada is we expect to be at this point by this time, and we're not there yet. So I'm hoping that this is the start of a growing trend across this country. Hopefully there's more insight into having these high performance centers in maybe the GTA, Atlantic Canada as well. But I know it's not a snap your fingers and it's automatically done kind of thing. There's obviously a lot of work has gone into this, and there's still a lot of work to do. But if you can get it up and started, then you can move forward with it.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite quotes recently is don't let perfection prevent progress. Sometimes we just try to do have the perfect thing to put forward to appease everybody. And sometimes you just got to get on with it. So I'm not making excuses why it's only 2 of the 4 or 2 of the 8. But hopefully we see really good results out of Calgary and Ottawa, and they can kind of be the template, right? But we've heard this, I don't know if argument or excuse is right, but Canada is huge and different provinces need and want different things. And you add the universities within that have different bureaucratic processes. Like you say, a lot of work has gone onto this. Megan Howard is a rock star. kind of getting these two, but we get pulled in a lot of different directions, I think at all times, all of us as rugby community members, right? Like we're all of us represent Rugby Canada, whether we like it or not. So yeah, it's big jobs for sure.
Yeah, also like about 2 weeks ago, Canada, the federal government announced like that massive uh what's it, cash infusion for all sports like that in
Yes.
Canada. It'll be interesting to see both the positive, negative aspect of what will come to the rugby thing, because you just said like about people pulling in different directions to different objectives, even in the
Yep.
same
And
sport. Mm,
And part of that, when you think of funding related to participation, like so funding previously has been really related to high performance sport, right? Like it's the NSOs are in place for high performance sport. And when you start thinking about how you can get funding for participation, like as much as we've now moved to Sport HQ as the national registration database, we were on Sport Lomo before, not that many NSOs have national registration systems where they can actually say, I have X amount of members in these communities across the country. Therefore, I can defend the amount of funding that I'm asking for. That is massive. And I know, some people have loved Sport Lomo, some people didn't. It's kind of bipolar in terms of how people feel, or polarizing, I should say. Sorry, it's kind of polarizing in terms of whether you liked it or hated it, but it's giving us a huge amount of information, and Play HQ will hopefully be doing that same for us.
Also, now coming back to the national side, we're actually going to switch from the women's to the men's a bit, but we can also discuss to like what kind of support you give to the women's as well, obviously. But you've been helping me in with the national side. How has that been like?
I've been helping whom, sorry?
I thought you said me in. Like, have you been like?
Oh, yeah, with the cap stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's very different because I feel very removed. So some of the players' names, like I feel like I could, rattle off close to 200 women's players. When it comes to our men, we had our 500th cap, I think, last year or the year before, close to. And so, to be honest, like I'm not as familiar with the history of the men's game. So it's actually been a really interesting exercise to kind of go through some of the history there and create people's caps and whatnot. One of the pet projects that I had done as well a few years ago was around getting the actual little red hat. So we distributed, 54 little red hats to individuals. Either they wanted the mail to them or presented at a game. And so we're trying to kick that off again for some of the summer caps as well. But like my favorite memory is Jim Ward, who on his 80th birthday got his cap from his playing in 1962.
Awesome.
And I think kind of doing that historical stuff on that side has been really cool. And then dealing with Miham and Christian around how the university calendar plays into the November test series, right? And we have slight control of when we can play the university championship. But at the end of the day, I think there's always going to be overlap with something, and you want to do your best, right? But I think you hope that you have enough strength in numbers that you can have maybe conflicting events going on at the same time, and that's okay, right? That you can make it work, and actually for the greater good, it makes sense.
Yeah, I think there was something about. So I know that I think it was Stephen Webb got his first cap in the game against USA last year, which Canada
I was
won.
there.
And so was Jeff. And then it came to the November test period, and he had declared for UBC to play in the CUMRC. And some people were like, why is he choosing that instead of going over to Europe and getting test experience? And it's like, well, he's been playing for his club for, however many weeks or months at this point. It just makes sense to stay in that environment now, because in a few years' time, he'll be able to play November test, but he won't be able to play the men's rugby championship for the university. So I understand it. And,
But I hope the athletes always feel that they have a choice.
Yeah.
That's that at the end of the day. And if it works for them, that they would rather, accept an invitation to go on tour, they have the ability, and that they feel empowered to be able to say no to going on tour to do something else and not lose future opportunities. If we are promoting university rugby out of one side of our mouth, We then cannot say that if you say, I'm saying no to a national team opportunity to stay with university rugby, that somebody is going to be blacklisted or punished. Like that should never happen. I hope it has never happened. And you hope that experiences can be gained from either. But at the end of the day, it's within the athlete's control to make that decision with the support network around him or her to make that decision in their best interest, always in their own best interest, because you're going to get conflicts. You just simply are. Life happens.
What are your thoughts with the upcoming international seasons for both the men's and women's side? We obviously have this new Nations Cup taking place. Canada is doing hosting this summer, and then they'll be heading to Europe in November to play the return fixtures. And as we mentioned before, we have the Rugby Rematch Tour with the women playing in Toronto and Ottawa. But before that, they'll be playing a few games in Scotland, England, and France as well. So what are your thoughts overall?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we get consistency of calendar, right? And knowing, if you think of how long ago people knew that we would be playing tests against whom, in what stadium, in what city, you want to be able to have kind of that advance notice. So I think we're trying. It comes out you're as a tier 1 women's nation, tier 2/3 men's nation. You don't necessarily get your pick for the men's international tests, and on the women's side, very much kind of related to funding and what goes on with the global calendar. So you're kind of reacting. So I'm certainly happy that we have tests in Canada. I think that's always important from the men's and the women's side. Winnipeg getting a test this year, I think, is fantastic. I think there's probably other cities across Canada that are worthy of getting, say that first test in a long time, whether it's men's or women's. I think you want to create that fan base across the country, and getting together within the community is really important. Being able to put on those kind of rookie rugby camps for the morning where, a handful of national team players take time out of their training to attend those is important. You create fans for life. You create, future superstars who met, XYZ, Sophie de Goody, Lucas Rumble, whoever it is, right? In person, it's really important. So I think competition is always good. I would say probably the level and the opposition for the men will be good tests. I think the game against the US last year was so exciting. And if you can get kind of some of those big name players who have a passion to play for Rugby Canada again, I think that will be really beneficial on the men's side. And on the women's side, I think, like I said earlier, like getting those bums in seats in BMO and TD Place is super important. That rematch, I think Canada is going to be foaming at the mouth from the World Cup final. Like it's going to be, and also the loss to New Zealand recently. Like I just think they're going to put a really good performance together against England in the fall. It's going to be really special. And having that time on tour, we're in the next cycle, and that's where you start building kind of the pairings, the relationship, the leadership for the next 4 years for the women. And going into 2027 for the men, obviously kind of like cementing that and seeing if you have any kind of late bloomers as we're, getting close to, is it 500 days away? You're going to start cementing a lot of positions, and kind of, it seems like it's far away, but it's really not. A year and a half goes by really fast.
Yeah. Speaking about, I do like Canada's chances in October for the women's team. I think, like I said in a previous podcast, I wasn't too surprised by Canada's loss to the Black Ferns. I mean, it was kind of just opposite of what you said. It's just them marking it on their calendar for us, and emotion, as you would know, is so much important on that rugby pitch, like starting strong, being mentally there. And I hope Canada can do that to England this October.
No,
Now,
totally.
yeah. Now, speaking about, this is kind of my question, like to ask, but are there any hints you can give us regarding national team selection for the men's or women's, especially?
Oh gosh, no, absolutely not.
Oh no.
We're so far removed now. I mean, it's the
Uh,
players that perform at the end of the day,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could. I wish I had that
Yeah. There are
That
some
crystal
players
ball.
I do hope to see in the men's team for the summer series like that. Matt Bookabum, sorry, Matt Bookabum, who hasn't like Ardron and Olmsted, they did their duty last August. It's like that. They can take the summer off and be there for November. But yeah,
Yeah. I think it's really important for those players when you think of like Ty and Evan around like
yeah,
having so much fun playing for Canada,
yeah. But it's
right?
good to
Like
see them again.
it it's part of the game, and when that is reinvigorated
Mhm.
um in you for whatever reason, like that's so important. And I hope I get a chance to see them in the Canada jersey again.
Yeah, I'm sure we will, but I mean, like, yeah, it definitely be good sooner than later too.
Hmm.
And I guess it's going to be that final question. So you mentioned you got your first cap 15 years ago playing in the 2011 Nations Cup in Oakville, Ontario.
Hmm.
Women's rugby didn't return to the GTA throughout that entire period until this upcoming Rugby Rematch Tour. And
Oh my
it's
gosh.
now,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's now looking with the intention, as you said, to try and sell out BMO
Mhm.
Field.
That's
How,
wild. We played on a field in 2011 where there was not the regulated distance between the 22-meter line and um, the halfway line, essentially the center line.
Mhm.
Like they mislined the field just 15 years ago, right?
yeah,
Like, is that not crazy? And now they're going to be playing in probably one of the biggest stadiums
yeah,
in Canada. So cool. So
yeah,
cool.
It's great
and
to see that growth. Mhm.
yeah, and it's so, and this is also a piece of information that we got from our interview with Sophie de Goody, is that in that Women's World Cup final in 2014, she was in the crowd cheering Canada on, and then 11 years later, she's at Twickenham,
Mhm.
the biggest Women's Rugby World Cup final to date, second biggest overall. How does it feel to you personally to see the rise of women's sports in general, but women's rugby in this circumstance
It makes me
in
emotional.
across Canada?
Cool.
It's I think from like a very personal perspective,
Mhm.
it's hard to imagine that it's hard to put into words like how lucky I am to have a part to play in that. Um, and regardless of what role I played, I'm no Sophie de Goody, I can tell you that. Um, but just we sport leads to so many different opportunities when you think of women empowering other women, being good role models, being leaders in the corporate world. And it's not just rugby, right? Like this transcends sport. It goes into your real life. You create better community members, better family members, better partners, better parents, better future club presidents, mini coaches. And it's massive. It's massive what you can do to impact people's lives. Just being a dot on a field, right? Running around, and the impact you can have. And I think we're so lucky in Canada to have such incredible role models that we've had over the years. Like we are just blown away by you could pick any single member of a team, you know, going back 20 years, probably even further. You think of Steph White, right? And just being able to capture anybody who played for Canada on the women's side, and they're a role model and they can speak to their experience and what an impact they've had on the game nationally. And I think that's really special to have such an incredible group of upstanding, value-driven individuals that used to play for nothing, for negative nothing, right?
Mhm.
Um, Paid so much out of pocket. And so to see that turn now where women and men get paid the same to play in test matches, it's huge. I wouldn't have imagined it 15 years ago. Yet here we are today.
Some good progress there. More to come, more needed, more to come, but that's some great
Sure.
progress. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really wonderful to hear. And, you know, as we mentioned, we have lots of Canadian rugby coming up later this year. We have the Nations Cup for the men in July. We have the Rugby Rematch Tour taking place in October. But all that sport is, you know, a few months away. If you're wanting to watch any rugby this coming weekend, we have on Premier Sports Super Rugby Pacific, Japanese League One, and the MLR games. The Champions and Challenge Cup finals are this weekend as well. I believe Friday and Saturday, and you can catch that on Flow Rugby. And the Premiership Women's Rugby will be returning soon, and you can watch Canadians such as Sophie de Goody, Alex Tessier, all of them playing on YouTube. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more, as well as our written pieces on our website, rougerugby.ca. We also are on Spotify and YouTube, as well as across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky, all at the Rouge Rugby. Maria, if people want to find you on social media, where can they go?
Maria Samson 5 on pretty much everything.
And Jeff, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on X at WP Rugby Jeff.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode. Maria, thank you so much for joining us. Jeff, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby Podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.